I'm Toby.
And I'm Christina.
This is our monthly assignment critique for the month of
April.
And the assignment was, Christina?
Repetition.
Good. I'm glad you know that since you just picked the images. I'd be worried if you said it was like flowers. All right. So, just a quick reminder that we are no longer doing general critiques. Once a month, we're doing a monthly critique based on an assignment we have given you. And we also do the weekly Raw Doctor. Mostly weekly.
Yes.
And that is where you folks out there, submit a nice raw image to us, or not so nice raw image. An image that you recognize could need some editing and would like to see what a professional like Christina could do to it using a program like Lightroom. We're using Lightroom. So, with all that said, we have a fantastic group of repetition images. We had a good participation this month. And I love that. And even if we didn't pick your image, the fact that you went out there, you took the time, made you a stronger photographer, I believe. And I thank you all for participating. And let's jump right into our first image.
Do we not want to talk about the next assignment?
Oh, we want to give them at the beginning? Sure.
Or do we want to talk about it at the end?
Let's do both.
Okay.
To remind people. So the next assignment is cropping. Now, Christina, can you describe that in a little more detail?
Sure. So you guys, I'm sure, are all familiar with cropping images to make them stronger and remove distracting elements. So this is going to be cropping in camera. So what we want you to do is get out there, find a subject that you like to photograph, and then figure out a way to crop part of the image, part of the subject, to use cropping creatively to showcase the best part of the subject or the part of the subject that most appeals to you. So we have picked out a few examples that we'll show towards the end of this critique. So stay tuned for that. But just to get you guys thinking about it, we do have a new assignment, and yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Now, when you first suggested cropping, I was like, wow. But then you showed me the examples, and that made a lot more sense. You want to get out there, and as Christina said, you're basically composing your images in such a way to crop out both distracting elements and or to create tension or drama or mystery. So you were using this technique of not filling the frame with a single subject so much as cropping part of it off.
Well, you are filling the frame, and ideally you are filling the frame, but you are doing it not in an obvious way. For example, if you're photographing a portrait of somebody, if you wanted to if you wanted to make a shot that is cropped creatively, then you maybe would crop like the eyes out, or you would crop like, I don't know, like the head out, even though that can look weird sometimes. Sometimes it can also serve to add interest and create more interest in the photo.
Sounds good. Okay, let's get started with our group of this month's assignment, repetition.
So this is our first image, and it's a great example of repetition. I am particularly fond of all the colors, the different colors. I like the little silvery, like teal color of the succulents, and then the live succulents, and then the rusty kind of color that's underneath them. I think that's creates a really nice contrast. And I'm watching, as I look at the image, I can notice that my eyes sort of travel all through it, which is really great. I mean, all of these are arranged pretty nicely, such that my eye travels all throughout the image and doesn't get stuck anywhere. If I had to offer any feedback, maybe it would be that this succulent didn't get cropped off. I'm being really picky, but because it's in focus so much, Like these ones are all cropped, but they're out of focus enough that it doesn't matter to me. They're just filling in the what otherwise would be dead space. But because this one is in focus, I would want to not crop it all the way. Maybe this one too. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's all I have to say about that.
I don't think I have anything to add other than I really like that this is our first image we're leading off, and repetition is an organic one. And there is certainly repetition in nature, but I think very quickly many of us, when we think of repetition, go to man-made stuff that has been created, and we see like railings and all kinds of repetition in construction and buildings. But here we got it. Nice. We could talk about the Fibonacci sequence. I believe these little succulent petals probably follow that.
I bet they do.
That
The
rule,
golden ratio.
The golden ratio, yes. Very nice.
Great. And Toby, you wanted to include this one.
I did. Well, I love this. As I was just talking about, one of the first things I think that I thought about when thinking about repetition is something similar to this. And I think that this is a fantastically well-balanced image and yet still creates some tension. It caught my eye right away as I was moving through these. I love these straight, I mean, this is just a cool building somewhere. I'm not sure where, but these straight lines that actually have a little bit of curve to them on the left, and just filling the frame from bottom left corner to top right corner as far as the eye can see. And then you have this kind of soft, curvy staircase to the right that balances that just nicely. And I think it's very well done. Perfect spot. Maybe if I was getting a little picky, this top left corner where we have just that little bit of gap and something else filling in, I may have cropped in just a tiny bit so that we're starting from a clean bit. Other than that, I really like it.
That would be my suggestion as well. And so right here and right there, I would crop that. And I think that would make for a stronger image.
Yep.
I guess before and after doesn't really show cropping, so. But yeah, no, I like all of the lines and they all repeat. It looks a little bit off center to me. The horizon line looks a little bit
tilted
slanted
to the right.
To me, yeah.
Tilted up to the right.
Yeah, but I think it might be just I don't know. It might be an optical illusion because I don't see a clear horizon line.
Right.
So I don't know what I would do about that.
Well, you might try to straighten it a little bit more, but I think that's part of what creates the tension that I enjoy in this image.
Yeah, I can see that. Okay.
Giuseppe has shared with us some really old books. Someplace in Italy. That's my guess, since he lives in Italy.
Yeah. And there's a lot of repetition, but then one of the books is in focus. I think with these pictures, one of the things that you guys should keep in mind as you're taking them is, why are you isolating one book or one section of this? Is it just to create depth? Is it just to show depth? Or is it because you're actually trying to highlight this particular book? So think about how you use your techniques and why you use them. I think a strong picture of this would have been, or a picture at, F11, if you had the light available to you, would have been just as strong as this, and if more of the books had been in focus. I'm not saying that this is a pleasing image. I like this image, but it seems a little arbitrary to have just focused on, this particular book. And I, of course, don't know the story behind why you photographed this, and there might be a particular reason why
you don't have to soften the blow that much.
Well, I don't.
I know.
But I just don't. I don't want to, come across as like, I'm trying to say that there might have been other reasons why this photo was taken that I am not aware of. Mm-hmm. So I just want to highlight those things. But just keep in mind, why is it that you're isolating this subject in particular?
Right. I think this looks very similar to lots of images that I like to make or try to make, and I often walk away afterwards wondering or thinking it could have been stronger. I just didn't. The image that I made just didn't do much for me, and I think this could be a stronger image with less depth of field to really show sharp book bound.
You mean more depth of field?
More depth of field. Sorry. Uh, to just show in sharp relief each of these old ancient texts, one right after the other, to really give the sense. We see that they're all there, but it does feel arbitrary with the focus. And again, I do the same thing both in stuff like this and out in the woods. I'll find something that's interesting and try to isolate it, and then afterwards look at it and say, well, what made that so special that I isolated it, other than I got to use a really wide aperture.
Right.
And a lot of times I don't have a good answer for that.
And a lot of the times we say, to isolate this subject, you should use a very wide aperture. So I do feel like we're contradicting ourselves a little bit, but at the same time, so why are you isolating the subject?
Right,
is the background really distracting? Or
right.
is it, in terms of repetition, this isn't always the case, but usually if you're photographing repetition, you'll want to show in pretty good detail all aspects of it, of the repetition. So, if anything, good for you for thinking outside of the box and not doing that, Giuseppe. And this is, like I said, a very pleasing image. But yeah, just wanted to sort of introduce that idea of like really thinking about why it is that you are making this artistic decision.
I think it's a good idea to introduce. Thank you.
Okay.
Next.
This is by Rose, and it is a Virginia grounds at Golden Hour.
I think it's the Veterans Cemetery there outside of D.C.
Yeah, that's what it.
Is that said? Okay.
It looks like.
Which I've been to. My grandfather on my mom's side is actually buried there, and so I've been there, and I've taken pictures there as well. And it is a very solemn place, but also quite a good place to take repetition images because of these gravestone markers. The challenge I've found there, I'm going to make this all about me, is it's difficult to do because they aren't perfectly lined up in so many ways, and there's also these little bits of hills and things of that sort that you can lose the feeling of repetition. But Rose, you have found a spot that I think is perfect, in that they climb away from us and really give us the sense, and they also are, they're converging to you and diverging away from you. It almost feels like in all directions. And I think that makes for a stronger image.
Yeah, so a few things that I see right off the bat. There is some dead space right here. So I think that if you had zoomed in a little bit more, either with your feet or with your focal length, you may have been able to crop this area right here and then this area right here and just brought us this, which would lead us to this sort of tree line. The other thing that's quite distracting is the sun flare right here. Sun flare, it can be an aesthetic choice sometimes. Some people really like it, some people really don't like it. To me, it feels very distracting. Like my eye keeps getting caught on this right here. So I would, it's really hard to clone out, especially when you've got all of these different, all this different spacing between all of these gravestones. But so, to get rid of flare in the future, you just shift your perspective a little bit so that the sun, you can tell when the flare is on your lens.
Right. Looks like you're shooting almost directly into the sun based on the direction of the shadows of the things. You could try, if you didn't have a lens hood, you could try using your hand to shield the lens as well. That's a good technique at times.
Yeah.
And yeah, I agree too. I don't like the lens flare.
So another thing that, this will, that's shooting into the sun will cause in your images is just lots of flatness. You should be putting your, when it makes sense, you should be putting the sun behind your subject, which is what you did, and you did a good job. But yeah, if you shoot into the sun, if you get this kind of flare, then all of the contrast is going to be washed out and you're not going to have a lot of it. So you're going to be finding yourself having to bring it back in post-production, and it just doesn't look quite the same as, the natural contrast you would get out of this particular light if you weren't shooting into the sun. So next time, try to take some pictures with lens flare in your lens, and then maybe move around until you still have the sun positioned roughly in the same direction, coming towards your camera, but maybe at more of an angle so it misses your sensor, it misses your lens, and you'll see that the quality of light is going to be much, much better.
Good. Thanks.
This image is really cool. I like
From Walter.
From Walter.
Yeah.
I don't think I have. I mean, the composition is great. There's something weird about this part of the image. It's throwing me off. This feels starting to feel a little too much like Dead Space, but in general, it's a really nice image. I like all of this up here. The colors are really nice. The very defined shadows and the spacing of them is really nice.
Has it been cropped square? Is that a perfect square?
I'm not sure if it's a perfect square. I think it isn't.
I think it is.
I think
I'm right.
it is. Okay.
Yep. So that's interesting. I'd be curious to see. I think I agree with you, Christina. There's a little bit of extra space on the right. This is minor though. Overall, I think this is a fantastic image, and the treatment here is just spot on. But it could be shifted just a tiny bit to the left. Give a little bit more room on the left, just a tiny bit. We're talking 10, 50 pixels, something like that, and a little bit less on the right, I think, would help my feeling about this. But otherwise, very nice. Hey, this looks somewhat familiar.
Yeah.
I went out this week and did a similar thing, star trail stacking. So if we read from the caption here, these are 73 pictures, and I really need to share with you all how I did this. I said I would do that, and I need to get that out soon. Using his Nikon D7100 with 35 millimeter f1.8 at ISO 400, 15 seconds, and f1.8. So real quick, for those who don't know, star trail stacking is where you take a series of images, then you bring them into Photoshop, and there's a mode in Photoshop. It's not specifically for star trails, but it works wonderfully, where you just open up all of these images and you sandwich them into one layer and tells Photoshop to maximum, and that means that the brightest pixels come through all of the layers, and so you get these little trails as the stars move, technically as the Earth moves, and our appearance of the stars move, and you stack them all together, and you get this fantastic blurring effect. And just off the frame up there in the top left corner is, I'm going to assume you're in the north here. I don't know whose name this is. That would be the North Star, because that is the point at which all of the stars rotate around, or the way the Earth rotates, not to belittle the science part of this. So my first critique is that you're so close to that center point. I would have liked to gone ahead and got it in the frame a little bit more, or make the call that it's going to be cropped, in a way that it's less. So that's first thing. But as far as repetition goes, I think this is very cool. You've got a lot of stars, and the lines just straight all the way down to the bottom right corner work really, really nicely. What is hurting this image, though, is the colors on that house, and this may not be something you have a lot of control over. It looks, at least, I don't know if this is your house or not. It looks like there's at least one light that was on the house that should be turned off. But maybe you had a street light behind you or something, or those tungsten, or one of those that is casting this kind of colored light onto this house, and it really, it's a very different color and feeling from this blue sky.
So this is, I think, a good candidate for a raw doctor, because it's really bright. So the sky in particular, you're going to get an unnaturally bright sky when you're photographing stars, because your shutter speed you're going to kind of have to overexpose a little bit. So it's not going to look like a pitch black night sky. I kind of do like the color. The more I look at it, it looks more of like a teal color. So if you're going for that look, then that's great. But I do think that that color of the house, the yellow color that's being reflected onto the house, is really distracting and doesn't fit very well with the rest of the image. So I think this would be a good candidate to be submitted for a raw doctor. You could do some cool masking techniques that would and basically paint that yellow off, like neutralize that yellow so that the sky stands out more. Otherwise, I really love the motion in this picture. It looks like you twisted the camera around because of the house, because the house is so still in contrast with the stars. It looks like you're almost twisting the camera around and creating this effect, in, just by moving the camera, which is really cool. And I do like the composition a lot. So.
Yep. I will say that having something, in the foreground that anchors the image is very good.
Yeah.
Just the colors need to be adjusted. This actually could be tricky to be a raw doctor because you need to shoot raws, then you need to bring them into Lightroom, and you're probably going to need to make a TIFF out of it to continue to have good editing control with things like white balance.
Well,
and it's going to be a monstrous image.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could work on a JPEG. It wouldn't be the same effect as using a TIFF or a RAW, but it would give people the idea of how to use the tools in Lightroom to sort of fix this. I mean, I wouldn't be expecting to get, a perfect image out of it.
Okay.
This is from Bob and Kate Photography.
Do you think they both took the picture together? One of them held the lens and one pushed the button?
I don't know. It says Bobby Westerfield created the image, so
That's
it's probably.
I know. I'm just giving them a hard time.
So
well, first off, you picked these images.
Yeah.
But you read my mind and picked most of the ones I was thinking about.
Well, funny it works that way.
Yeah.
So this image I like because it is repetition, but with some geometry introduced. It's cool. So what I mean about geometry is, so you've got these, all these repeating stairs, but then you've got these like lines that I'm guessing it's a spiral staircase, and you've got all these lines sort of breaking up all of the lines within each landing. So I like that a lot. That's a really interesting perspective. I also like that you introduce some shadows, or that you photograph these shadows. It may be that the picture is a little bit stronger without the shadows, but I also feel like it balances the image some. So yeah, it's a really cool abstract image. I enjoyed looking at it. I don't really have a ton of critique because it's abstract, and I feel like all of the elements fall in. They're all very balanced. So yeah, I mean,
maybe that bit of shadow at the bottom. There's just that one, little shadow.
I don't know. I feel like that helps to balance the rest of the image. I feel like it wouldn't be
this little shadow right here.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I'm not convinced that it does. And I think we probably though would not have, or at least I would not have picked this picture if it had just been the wooden stairs without the shadows on it. The shadow adds this little bit of drama to it. And it's just, it's a simple thing. I mean, probably one of us could have found something similar like this nearby to photograph, but it just worked. And I think the treatment here of the black and white, or maybe it's not even black and white, it's just so, I think it is, aged, that it's just very monochrome in its repetition as well. I like it.
So this is very similar to before, but a lot simpler. And I don't know, I feel like I could just keep looking at this image all day, and my eyes would just keep going back and forth from one end to the other. So I really like that about it. The composition is pretty perfect. There's nothing I would change. And I love the colors. There's almost, so the depth of field, so this is at f11. And this is sort of what I was referring to when we were talking about Giuseppe's picture. This person could have also just stopped down and tried to isolate one of these bars, but this person didn't, and so they ended up with this cool image. So
Yeah.
I guess what I'm trying to say is either way works, but this is just an example that I was trying to illustrate before.
This is the other extreme.
Yeah,
So
and you
to
can
say.
see you still get a depth, you still get a shallow depth of field towards the end, because that's kind of inevitable sometimes based on the distance that you're photographing this from. But yeah, no, and I like the colors. I like that sort of yellowish brown contrasted with the green. It's just a generally nice, pleasing image.
Yep. Good. I don't have anything to add. I think it's very nicely done.
This
Now
is
we've got stormtroopers from Corey. A lot
a lot of
of
them. It's a lot of stormtroopers.
This is very appropriate that we have this image today. Do you know why?
Because it's Star Wars Day.
Why is it Star Wars Day, Christina?
Because it's May 4th.
And what does that have anything to do with anything?
Because people say, "May the 4th be with you."
I just think it's silly. I like Star Wars, but not that much that I get super excited about it.
Oh, you did. That was the first thing you said when we woke up this morning, and now you're reminding me.
I know, but I just wanted you to say it on this video we're making right now.
Okay.
Okay. So I think we could take, in some ways, some of our comments about Giuseppe's picture and reapply them here. What makes that stormtrooper, special that he gets the treatment of focused in on?
Well, no, because they're all the same.
Where the books were not?
No. I mean, I think this could be an interesting image as well if you stop down to F11, but all the stormtroopers are the same. So no matter which one you choose to isolate, they're all pretty much good, unless there are variations that we're not seeing, in which case, we don't really...
Well, they are clones.
Right. So there aren't any variations.
Just trying to up the nerd level here. Okay. All right. That's good. That's good. I wasn't really thinking along those lines.
Well, so did you totally miss what I had said before? That, think about why it is that you're isolating this. Does it have any special meaning? No, but I think it's...
Well, that's what I'm saying here. Why does that one doesn't have any more special meaning than the rest?
But they're all the same. So one can't have really more meaning than the other if they're all the same. Does that make sense?
Right.
If they're all the same.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Is it?
Yeah.
All right. I don't think that's what you're saying.
We're leaving all of this in.
Okay.
Okay. Well, so yes, I agree. Let's go back to what we definitely agree on, that it could be a strong image, a potentially strong image with a large depth of field as well, showing all of these little helmets in focus.
Right. So I do agree with that it would work either way.
Okay. So my one critique of this, beyond what I've said, is looks our color balance. They all have a little bit of a reddish tint to them.
They do.
And this is where I think I would be inclined to try to adjust the color balance a little bit, but then probably just bring the saturation down.
Yeah.
That would take any color cast out. That's a quick way to often fix color casts.
Yeah.
If you're working with basically black and white stuff.
Yeah. There's a little bit, just to get super nitpicky, I would have cropped that out. This keeps catching my eye because there's just so much white over here. Also, this guy is sort of intersecting with this guy, which I kind of would have liked to see him more over in this area because this feels like there's a big gap. Again, just being super nitpicky. But shifting may have not really helped in this case because you may have introduced other distracting elements. But if you had the opportunity to do that, if you could do that, then that's what I may have done. But otherwise, yeah, it's a nice picture.
Right. Now, what I do like here that sometimes, or usually I don't, is I don't really have a sense of scale. I assume that these are all action figures, about 6-7 inches tall, or maybe a little less. But maybe they're full-size people.
I don't know.
This was a stormtrooper parade. They do things like that in California, I hear.
I'm sure they do. But they don't.
So usually I really want to know scale in a picture. I'm really bothered if I can't figure out the size of what we're looking at. But in this picture, I think it works well and adds a little bit of mystery to it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Corey.
And our last picture, it is by William. And so two things I like about this picture. I like the repetition. And I like the color. So there is, I'm not sure that these colors really go well together, but I like that there's just this little tiny pop of color among all of the green.
Something breaking the repetition up.
Yes. Yeah. So I like that a lot.
Mhm.
It looks a little cool to me. Some of these shadows look very blue. So I might warm this picture up a tiny bit. But otherwise, it's great. The contrast is great. The composition is great. I don't think I have anything more to say.
Very nice. Now, William and I were having conversation about, I think we had it on Instagram, about this assignment and it being difficult, to make a good image. I think, again, I want to say thank you to everybody who participated, whether or not we critiqued your images today, because it takes effort. I think very few of you probably were lucky enough to walk out and be like, "Ooh, that's the perfect repetition image. Snap, I'm done." I think most of you worked at it, and that's what we want. And I was doing the same. I actually want to take a moment and show you my picture. So as I said, William and I were having this conversation, and I was down in Baltimore a few weeks ago, walking by these high-rise apartments that just to my eye showed awesome repetition. It's just these railings stretching up into the sky. But we were doing things and we were walking by at different times of the day, and every time the light just wasn't very good, or I just wouldn't get an angle that I wanted. And so this was one image I took. I didn't like that one for the angle. And then this is actually a different building.
No, it's just, oh yeah, it is a
Yeah,
different
it is a
building.
different building. And I didn't like that as well. And then I found this angle right underneath. This was in the evening, so the light was a little bit more balanced. And I like this one. And I just want to share that. Folks who follow me on Instagram did see that. And we're going to be starting Instagram assignments separate from these weekly critiques here. And be on the lookout for more information about that. If you don't follow the Facebook page, make sure you enable notifications because it's easy to miss posts on there as well. And I'll be talking about those soon as well. Thank you again to everybody who participated and submitted. And a reminder that the assignment for May is cropping.
Yeah. So we wanted to show just a couple of examples that we found on the internet, just on the spot really quickly to show you what we mean by cropping. So I can just figure out how to drag this down. So this image is a pretty, it could have been a pretty traditional portrait of this couple in this moment, but this photographer chose to crop out the eyes and most of their bodies and just show the smile, which really it's the essence of this picture is that smile, and we know what's going on. So there's just enough information to keep us wanting to know more about what's happening in this image. So your eye goes right to the smile, that's the focal point, and then it just like wanders down here and then goes, so it's still a really well balanced image, but it leaves a little bit of mystery. This image similarly, could have showcased all of this fish, but they didn't. They cropped actually most of the fish, but we can still infer that it's a food shot, that this fish is cooked, that it was for consumption. We can infer a lot of things just by looking at this, but it's more creative, it's more dynamic, it's more interesting. Same with this image. There's really just hints of what it is. Obviously that's a butt and these are hands.
I'm laughing because I took a screenshot of my mom's Facebook post there. So
yes, and this one is also awesome. No, just kidding. Yeah, so hopefully this gives you guys a good idea of what we mean by cropping. We don't just mean like cropping in post. That's the other thing. None of these images.
We will be looking at their dimensions.
Were cropped. Well, I mean, you can. We won't be looking at dimensions. We'll just have to trust that you guys cropped in camera. And it's okay to crop in post-production too if you didn't get it quite right in camera, that's fine. But what we don't want you to do is take a picture and then have it in front of you and then come time to submit for the assignment, you're like, well, I don't really have a cropping picture. Let me just crop whichever one.
And that's
And
why I'll be looking at the dimensions.
We want you to be conscious of doing this while you're taking the picture.
Right.
So
we want you to compose with crop.
yes.
Yes. And I was going to add one more thing. Oh, and you're going to submit these by the last week of May. The easiest place to remember to submit them is photorec.tv/rawdoctor. That is where you can go to submit both for monthly critiques and for the weekly Raw Doctor assignments. And on that note, I think we're done.
Yep.
Yep. Thanks everybody for watching, participating, and leave your comments and questions down below. Thanks.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.